Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Sean McKay, aka the Lousy Investor. And today I want to talk about one of the core concepts for us in the financial world, and that is the idea of your net worth. So I want to talk about what your net worth is and how we should think about that, especially for those of us that are real estate investors. Because unfortunately, my belief is that a lot of us have kind of a narrow idea around net worth, around building our asset base. And I think that there's some things that can be a little bit dangerous for us in our wealth building. So stay tuned and hopefully there'll be some value for you today. All right, so the first thing I want to do is touch on what your net worth actually is and how we calculate that. So I'm going to give you a very, very basic example just so that we're all on the same page. So when we think about our net worth, ultimately, we're just simply calculating the ratio between the amount of assets that we own and the amount of liabilities or debt that is attached to our financial life. So this very basic example looks something like this. So let's say you have a house that is worth around $500,000. And between your retirement accounts and cash that you have in checking and savings accounts, you have $100,000. And lastly, you have a car that in its current condition is valued at around $30,000. So we have 500 for the house, 100,000 in retirement accounts and cash. We have 30,000 in terms of the value of our vehicle. So we have 630,000 in assets. Now, in this very, very basic example, we're going to assume this individual has no credit card debt and they just simply have a mortgage on that house for $200,000. So we have 630,000 in assets and we have $200,000 in liabilities. And so that would mean that the individual has $430,000 of a net worth. That is their net worth, $430,000. So now that we're all on the same page, I wanted to get into a story that was really impactful for me as I think about my financial journey, as I think about how my wife and I have moved forward through our investing career and how we think about our investing, and especially in real estate, where you can certainly put mortgages on properties and there's kind of a liability or a debt issue that you need to be concerned about as you're thinking about your investing career. And so I was really lucky. This was probably 12, 13, 14 years ago. I was having a conversation with the founder of my company at American IRA, Jim Hitt, and he's a lifelong entrepreneur. He's been investing in real estate longer than I've been alive. And so he's always got these great ways of kind of framing the investing world for me so that I can make progress and not have to make mistakes that perhaps other people without great mentors make. And so he shared with me this great little kind of quick story, this quick analysis. And it took me a long time to unwind, and I thought it might be helpful to share with you. And so he said to me one day, he says, Sean, there's a good $10 million net worth, and then there's also a bad $10 million net worth. So obviously that caught my attention. That's a lot of money. It doesn't seem like 10 million could ever be bad. But obviously, again, that caught my attention. And so he realized I was engaged. And so then he proceeded and he says, so if you own $12 million of real estate, Sean, and you only owe $2 million against that same real estate, I submit to you that that is typically going to be a good $10 million net worth. I thought, yep, that sounds great. I'd love to accumulate 12 million of real estate and to owe 2 million against that. That seems manageable. And yeah, we're in agreement there. He said, but if you own $140 million of real estate and you owe $130 million against that same real estate, that is a bad $10 million of net worth. And so, frankly, it never occurred to me that individuals can own $140 million of real estate at this point. But I thought, okay, that seems like there's a lot more moving parts to that. There seems to be perhaps more danger in all of that debt. And so still love to have that $10 million of net worth, but okay, I understand those situations are different. And so the great thing that Jim would do for me as a financial mentor was he wouldn't unpack that entire analysis for me. He would let me sit with that and certainly over time ask questions around it, but it really gave me a chance to think deeply about that. And so today I want to share with you three ideas of what I've come up with over the years and really what I believe Jim meant when he talked to me about this good 10 million versus this bad 10 million. And again, hopefully there's some value in there for you today, especially if you're kind of starting on your real estate journey. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the idea of the relationship between the liabilities and the assets. And so the spread is really great when we're talking about the $12 million real estate portfolio where you only owe $2 million against that real estate. It's very reasonable to assume that if you had to or wanted to sell off any of the assets in that portfolio, you could sell one of the properties off and you could make a significant profit from selling those properties off. Now, conversely, if you have this huge real estate portfolio, but there are just a ton of significant mortgages on those properties, if you ever needed to get cash from these assets, you might have to sell off a ton of these assets to be able to get to the cash. So let's say that you get to a point in life where maybe you're paying for college for one or multiple children and you're not wanting them to be burdened with student loans. So you're just trying to be a phenomenal, let's say, parent for them and kind of help them start off without being buried in debt, then you might have to sell off a lot of real estate to be able to pay for the really expensive college experience. Or maybe one of your children's getting married and you want to be able to help with that. So any sort of life events where you're going to need to get to significant capital, that can be a huge problem if you're highly, highly leveraged. So that's lesson number one for me. And that's certainly something that my wife and I think on a lot, especially as we've all been through these wild periods with the pandemic and what have you. Having a margin of safety, having a lot of equity in your assets can be really, really beneficial if you lose a job or something like that happens. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was how having a lot of liabilities, having that kind of bad $10 million scenario that we spoke about, how adversely that can affect the cash flow that your real estate assets produce. We all know that if you have a portfolio of properties that does not have mortgages on them, those things will cash flow far, far better than properties that do have mortgages on them. And so if we're thinking about a portfolio that is very highly leveraged, it's possible that it could actually be a negative cash flowing portfolio where each month, even though you have this great base of assets, you would, to the degree that you'd be able to keep it going, you'd have to actually cut checks to the mortgage companies beyond what the properties are actually producing. And so that can obviously be really scary, really treacherous. And I know I certainly wouldn't be able to keep that going very long if I had 130 million in mortgages or something like that. So that's scenario number two, is it will really negatively impact our cash flow if we have a highly leveraged portfolio. Even if we have that 10 million net worth, if each property is upside down, even just $100 or two a month, that's going to get ugly quickly. And so the third concept that I wanted to talk about was again revolving around the mortgages on the property, but specifically the types of mortgages that we'll probably have to get if we have this huge scaled portfolio where we have, let's say, 500 units, maybe 1,000 units. That's a lot of properties to finance. And so what does that look like? So with that $12 million portfolio where we owe $2 million on it, it is very reasonable to assume that as investors, we could actually construct a portfolio of rental properties, maybe even single family houses, where over time we're buying properties and we're getting nice 30-year fixed mortgages on the properties. We're never going to have to worry about refinancing. We're never going to have to worry about our interest rate going up. And especially in today's environment where interest rates are really starting to spike, we don't have to worry about that with 30-year fixed financing. So that smaller $12 million portfolio can certainly be a far, far safer debt structure. Now, conversely, if we owe 130 million in mortgages to different lenders, I would assume that you're going to have to be in this commercial loan space where you're getting mortgages from lenders where they're amortized over 20 years, but they typically have a 5, 7, sometimes a 10-year balloon or call on the note, which means that 5, 7, 10 years into that mortgage, the lender says, okay, we're either going to change the interest rate on you, or we're no longer willing to finance this property and you have to get a new mortgage for this property. Now, this can be really scary because certainly for those that were stuck in that 2007, 2008, 2009 housing crisis, uh, getting a new mortgage in turbulent times and difficult financial times can be very, very challenging. It can be very, very stressful. And that can be compounded if we fall into unfortunate circumstances. Maybe we lose our job, something happens. Banks are probably not going to be willing to give us a new mortgage. And so it can be a really dangerous portfolio to structure if we are very highly leveraged, if we're solely reliant on big commercial loan products, because we just don't know what the future holds. In 5, 7, or 10 years, we could be in a downturn in our country. We could be going through a recession. Our personal life may not be as solid as we would hope for it to be. And so our just personal bankability could be really, really difficult at that time. So again, as crazy as it sounds, it is possible to have a bad $10 million of net worth. It can be a dangerous kind of debt structure. Our cash flow could be really poor. And so we want to make sure that as we're building our real estate portfolio, that we're doing things that we feel comfortable with, that are sensible, that we feel like give us some flexibility. And if things get tough, we're still going to be able to hold on to these assets over time. And we're not kind of building this house of cards. So I know this was a little bit of a rant today, but hopefully you found some value in it. And thanks for joining us today. If you got any value, please hit the like and the subscribe button. And we'll see you again for some more content. Thanks so much. Have a great day.